The research topic I have chose for this project is social control theory. Social control theory is the means by which members of society attempt to induce each other to comply with the society's norms. Norms are expectations of conduct in particular situations which regulate human social relations and behavior. Norms vary according to how widely people accept them, how society enforces them, how society transmits them, and how much conformity people require. Some social norms may require considerable force to ensure compliance. Others may require little or none. Norms make crucial contributions to the process of maintaining order. There are two types of norms: prescriptive norms, which tell people what they should not do. There's prescriptive norms, which tell them what they ought to do. Norms set standards for conducts and establish the basis for interpreting actions and events. Social control theory looks for social factors that help people to follow norms or obey the law. According to our textbook, Sociology of Deviant Behavior, control theorists share certain assumptions with psychoanalysts regarding human nature and the importance of controlling supposedly innate tendencies. There are more than one social control theory, however, they all have in common the social bond theory, which the social bonds between people that encourage people to follow norms and laws. Travis Hershey, who was the leading exponent of social control theory, identified four components of a person's bond with society that tend to prevent deviant behavior. The four components are attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. Attachment refers to specific groups such as family, church, friends, which gives the person the feel of respect, affection, and socialization to the groups. The second principle is commitment, which according to our textbook, describes the degree to the importance of a person's stake in conforming behavior so that acts of deviance jeopardize others' more valued conditions and activities. Concerns about one's reputation or losing one's job are examples of commitment. The third component is involvement, which refers to non-deviant physical activities, such as being involved in sports, church, and other community service activities. Continuing involvement in conventional activities will strengthen the commitment of the individual. The last component is belief, which refers to personal allegiance to the dominant value system in a group. In other words, the values that the individual has, which are usually passed on from generation to generation, and we've came to learn these morals usually from families. I chose this topic because it is important to understand why an individual does not commit deviant acts, or to understand what components are not applied to the individual who does commit those deviant acts. By researching this topic, society will understand why some individuals have broken the laws or have committed deviant acts. What is deviance? Deviance is a collection of persons or acts that society disvalues, finds offensive, or has condemned. According to Neighborhood Poverty and Negative Behavior, an examination of differential association and social control theory, it focuses on the children's negative behavior that arises from family, parents, and community. The study was performed built and on the existing knowledge that it's influenced by poverty, neighborhood, parental stress, and so on. According to a statement on the article, previous studies have provided evidence that early negative behavior in children leads to an increased likelihood of adult criminal behavior. Social control theory and differential association are used in the study to show the importance of family, discipline, and neighborhood environment in the development of a negative behavior. Hershey utilizes a cultural deviance perspective from the belief that youth who have no attachments to their parents or a significant relationship with another adult are exposed at a higher rate to criminogenic influences, leading to deviant opportunities. The methods used in this study were phone interviews of mothers and fathers, a collaborative study which was conducted over the phone, in person, and through field work. The purpose was to collect socio-demographic data on the families to collect information on children's health, father's involvement, and the child care, gender, poverty, and neighborhood socioeconomic status, parental stress and parental mastery, discipline, aggravation in parenting, and child behavior were measured to conduct this study. The result came to be that race is not a predictor of negative behavior or delinquent activities. The second article examined the relationship between neighborhoods, social ties, shared expectations for informal social control and actual parochia, and public informal social control actions taken by residents in response to big neighborhood problems. This article is titled Neighborhood Social Ties and Shared Expectations for Informal Social Control. Do they influence informal social control actions? In order to gain their results, they provided a survey to 1,310 residents, reported 2,614 neighborhood problems across 148 neighborhoods. They examined informal social control actions taken by residents when faced with neighborhood problems. The results were that residents with strong ties are more likely to engage in public and informal social actions than those who actually lack social ties. Meaning that those residents that have stronger ties in their neighborhood are more than likely to commit deviant acts. On the third article, an examination of differential association and social control theory, the study applied was differential and social control theory. The third article is titled An Examination of Differential Association and Social Control Theory. This study applies the differential and social control theory to understand juvenile delinquency. They use the path analysis model to explore relationships with family, the self-image of the individual, and behavior. It suggested that positive self-image leads to decreased delinquency in juveniles, while the association with delinquent peers is a predictor of delinquent behavior. In similarity to Article 1, which points out the importance of family cohesion, family stressor, and non-familial relationships in the development or prohibition of deviant behavior. In the study, they used additional interviews and used variables such as gender, race, and age. They measured family stressors, family cohesion, non-familial relationships, self-image, and peer delinquent activities. The results came to be that girls tend to have higher self-image and more positive behaviors, which have lower incidence of delinquency. Boys, on the other hand, have lower self-image and greater associations with delinquent peers and fewer positive relationships and have higher rates of deviant behavior. The fourth article is social control theory and delinquency. Hershey's social control theory proposed that delinquents or deviants fail to form or maintain a bond to society consisting of the four components. A longitudinal study was used of 2,213 10th grade boys from 87 schools. They provided them a survey that measured the four components that Hershey introduced along with delinquency. In social control theory, the peer relations of delinquents are characterized by their low level of social skills. The lack of relationship between the peer attachment and delinquent behavior therefore reflects the unimportance of friends to delinquent youth. This analysis basically made it possible to see a comparison of the effects of parental versus the school attachment on belief. It stated that the school attachment is much more larger than the coefficient for the path from parental attachment to belief. The results shows that parental attachment affects school attainment, which is strongly related to the level of belief, implying that part of the effects of parental attachment on belief is transmitted through school attachment. According to the last article, Race, Family Structure, and Delinquency, a test of differential association in social control theories, the studies of the relationship between race and the delinquency have typically found that broken homes lead to a greater delinquency among blacks than whites, but have not demonstrated empirically why this is so. So basically, this paper derives theoretical mechanisms from differential association theory and social control theory. And it specifies how broken homes may influence delinquency among both blacks and non-blacks. The analysis specified a structural equation model of delinquency. This study used data from the Richmond Youth Project, which was consistent with the previous research. The previous research found that broken homes actually have a larger impact on delinquency among blacks than non-blacks, but unlike the previous studies, the model explains the effect completely. For my research method, I decided to use a survey questionnaire that consisted of 5 questions. Basically, the 5 questions asked in regarding of their age range. It also asked about their gender, and I listed the 4 components that Hershey has stated to be the principles. So the 4 components that I included were attachments, involvement, commitment, and belief. And basically, I just required them to circle the ones that did apply to them. And from there, I questioned whether they had committed a deviant act and whether they were subjected to a disciplinary action. Based on their response, I went ahead and determined whether the person's bond with society actually prevented deviant behavior, and basically whether they actually followed norms and obeyed the law. I distributed 10 questionnaires or surveys to people who ranged from the age of 18 and up. My limit was 65 years. The reason why I did this was because I wanted to see the different responses, since there is a huge gap in age, and because at the time that a person who is now 65 was 18 years old, they probably were raised in different, well, obviously they were raised at different times, and were given different norms to follow. The results came out to be a 50-50. Half of the surveys were actually filled out completely, and basically they circled most of the 4 components that Hershey had stated to be as principles. I found interesting that some of the individuals who actually filled out the survey found it difficult to understand what these 4 components were. They seemed to question what attachment meant, involvement, commitment, and belief. When they did answer or responded to this survey, they made a lot of questions. I tried to explain it to them in a way that I wouldn't give out the answer, or at least what this truly meant for my study. It was interesting to see that the results actually varied. It didn't really make a huge difference from people who are 65 years old and those who are between the ages of 18 and 25. A lot of those people, or some of the people who are actually in the range of 65, came to tell me that although their times were a bit more difficult, they've actually become more understanding of today's norms. In Mark 7:20 through 23, it states, "And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness, and these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." By thinking or having these evil thoughts, the Bible states that this is a deviant act. It defiled the person, and in reality, in today's society, this actually happens very often now. There's a lot of theft, murder, sexual immorality. There's just so much going on in our society today, and since it changes years by years, more and more people seem to commit more deviant acts, and those who are law-abiding and actually fall under the social control theory, they seem to actually have one of those 4 components, or fall under one of those 4 components. And normally I would say that it's the belief that the individual has that has made them more law-abiding and not commit any deviant acts.